Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Welcome, Mallory. Welcome, Erin. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk with both of you about the Wheel of Fortune. So, before I get ahead of myself, I would love if both of you could take turns introducing yourself. I feel like probably there's a lot of people tuning into this podcast that know each of you individually, but maybe would you like to start us off, Erin, and just introduce yourself?
Sure. I love this. First of all, I just need to say that I was Googling myself recently just to see what comes up. And Jonathan, my first podcast with you from when you started, what is like one of the first results that comes up. So I was thinking of you recently. But anyway, if you don't know me, my name is Erin. I'm a devotional astrologer and esoteric strategist. And I like to say I have a feral heart. And I like to help people rediscover the joy and satisfaction and magic of their life through sharing my love of the divinatory arts, of which astrology is one of them. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
Of course. How about you, Mallory?
Um, yeah, I'm Mallory. I'm a tarot reader and a psychotherapist and artist. And I work with people one on one mostly, offering readings and ongoing spiritual guidance. And I think one thing Erin and I share is the love of Venus and goddess tradition. So I'm really excited to be here.
Yay. Um, how do I want to start this off? Well, let me tell you a little bit about uh how this came to be. So I was thinking about creating an episode for the Wheel of Fortune, which is in 2026, which is the time we're recording this, is technically the card of the year if we look at the numerology, right? So 2 plus 2 plus 6 equals 10, which is the number that in the tarot is assigned to the Wheel of Fortune. And I had originally thought of another friend of mine who couldn't do it. This is all very Wheel of Fortune. Like this story is Wheel of Fortune. She couldn't do it. So then I have been talking to Mallory and I was like, of course, I want to have Mallory. And then during the course of our voice memo conversation, Mallory, we got to a point where suddenly Erin's name came up. So then I was like, okay, let's do this. And apparently, while we were exchanging voice memos, Erin told me that the Wheel of Fortune is her birth card. Is that right,
Mhm.
Erin? Mm-hmm.
It is, yes. If you
Wow.
do the same process with my birth date, you get 10.
Mm,
So,
mm-hmm.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. I mean, just a side note, the planet Jupiter, which is associated with the Wheel of Fortune, is my chart ruler. So it's also it just makes sense for me, you know.
Mm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So surprise, not surprise.
Um, what has that experience been like for you? Like, how do you understand the Wheel
Yeah.
of Fortune as your life card?
Yeah, it's basically like don't I don't want to say don't, but it's like things aren't what they seem, essentially. And that's in all of its varieties and shapes and sizes. What seems like might be a downturn might actually be a setup for something else. What seems really actually tasty and delicious might be more of a seven of cups moment, and it's going to really put you right back under the wheels. So, yeah, it's kind of really taught me to hold things gently and not get too attached to any one way of being or living or thinking or feeling.
Mm. Hmm.
Which sounds kind of ominous, but it's also a very joyful and freeing way to live, I'll just say.
That didn't feel ominous to me at all. It
Okay.
felt so like nourishing.
Okay, good. I was like, don't hold on to things too tightly because they will change.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of Jupiter, Mallory and I are both Virgo risings. So our chart rulers are Mercury, but they are in Pisces for me and Sagittarius for you, Mallory. So there's also a lot of connection to Jupiter in our chart. Um, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
curious. I'm curious how this card shows up for you, Mallory. What comes to your mind?
Yeah. I mean, my sun is also conjunct Jupiter, and
Mhm.
Jupiter's my dispositor. So I feel very and I have a lot of Pisces action. So I feel I have a very Jupiterian chart and mind, you know. I think so. Yeah, I kind of made like a this is maybe this is even Jupiterian. Like my process of planning for this was just I was like writing down lots of keywords and like especially Sagittarius Mercury, I feel like there's just constant connections being made in my mind and sort of like radiant focus, radiant ideas. Um and like a to me Jupiter feels like a sense of possibility. Um like anything is possible, anything can happen, big picture. Um it also like I've become more aware of the bigness of Jupiter, which is not always like wanted. Just we don't always want the grand scale of life experience. But yeah, I think I'm very keyed into there's a part of me that just is kind of like I keep going. I keep going, I keep thinking, I keep imagining. And that part of me feels very Jupiterian.
I love that. Yeah.
How about you?
That's a great question. I must say that when I was thinking about this year being the Wheel of Fortune year, I drew a blank. I was like, I have no idea what that meant. Um, it does remind me of I think similar to you, Erin, I would say in my life too, it's all a matter of scale, right? When I think about Jupiter, I think about scale. And as you said, the things that are in the short term good things can present a lot of problems or challenges. When you step back and you see the 10-year impact of it. And similarly, the things that are challenging could actually bring a lot of really great lasting benefits. Yeah, in this moment, when I think about the Wheel of Fortune, I think about the idea of karma, which is literally just the idea that time is circular, right? That time is not linear, that it represents this, if you are at the top, then you eventually will experience the bottom as well. If you are at the bottom, then you are on your way up. And I think about how in my own practice with astrology, the one thing that's always true is change. right? And if someone is having a great year, then next year might not be so great. And if someone is having a yucky experience, then that's also not going to last forever. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Definitely. I like too, one of the images that has come up for me. I would say this is generally Jupiterian, but I think we can see it in the Wheel of Fortune is just this idea of play and chance. You know, we think of like a roulette wheel, like another all the different wheels that we can think of and how we are placing our bet on something and we really after we place that bet, we don't have control over where the dice land.
Mm. Yeah.
And like that's just another way of bringing that almost like a playfulness and entertainment kind of part to it. It's like, yeah, it's the for the love of the game is another phrase that kind of comes through for me when thinking about Jupiter and like
Mm.
play and how we learn through play. Like when we're little, we learn about strategy. You know, you play checkers with someone older than you and they
Yeah.
totally wipe the board with you. And you're like, "Oh, I've learned some things today," you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it influences how we move about our life after that. So as an adult, by age anyway, I try to I try to remember I try to remember that. Like, okay, it's for the love of the game. It's for the
Mm.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
It's also making me think about the word strategy kept sticking out at me from what you were sharing, Erin, from the time that you uh, call yourself a strategist. And it makes me think about how very often in my work with clients, for example, but also with myself, the right strategy isn't fixed, right? There's no strategy that always works with any context. It has to take into account the where you are in the life cycle of a particular creative project or of a business or of someone's life. Like something that I've had to learn the hard way in working with people is an advice could be objectively a good advice, but if you give it at the wrong time, when a person is actually needing to be seen or to be validated and you tell them the truth, that can also set people's progress back quite a bit. And so that awareness of where we are in the turn of the wheel feels to me like perhaps part of wisdom as well, right? It's like what the Serenity Prayer said, something about courage to change what I can. Um, I'm completely blanking on the exact phrasing here. Maybe one of you could help me, but
The wisdom to know what we
wisdom.
can change, or wait, the courage to change what we can, and the wisdom to know. Oh, I'm getting it confused too, but
Yeah,
knowing what we
Yeah.
can change and can't, and then the courage to change what is possible, right? For
that's
us to
right.
Mhm.
change. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
I
wisdom
love
to know the difference. Mm.
totally. And
Yeah.
I love what you're saying, Jonathan, because that's such a big thing about strategy and like the most visceral experience I've ever had about employing strategy, and it always goes out the window for the most part, was being a birth worker. Part of being a birth worker is you set up a plan, a birth plan, and it's usually the ideal scenario for how birth is going to go. But the whole thing about it is we want to think through the options just so we know what they are. So when an opportunity presents itself, we can make an informed choice. That's what it's about. However, most birth situations do not in any way, shape, or form go according to plan. Everything goes out the window, and you are
Mhm.
just in the moment making the best decisions that you can make that support you and the experience that you want to have. And yeah, it was very much about we're creating this plan, we're creating a strategy, but we're also holding it gently, knowing that it's likely not going to be like this at all. And it's still going to be perfect and beautiful just the way it is.
Mm, I love that, Erin. It's
Can I
remind
share a quote? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't
Yeah,
mean to interrupt you. It
go for
made
it,
me think
Mallory.
of a quote from Tarot for Change, but I'll remember. You
Go
can
for it.
share.
You go ahead.
Oh,
I
well,
remember too.
I was gonna say that I think that the Wheel of Fortune is definitely about adaptation and evolution and like responding to a moment, right? And I love that Erin brought up strategy as well, and like there being a playfulness to strategy that is really important. I was just thinking about like also mischief makers and you know, showing up to the unexpected. But the it just made me think of this passage from Jessica Doerr's Tarot for Change about the wheel. So she writes, "The Wheel of Fortune is a she's talking about when we say trust the process, right? And like this, which is so, I think, gets thrown around a lot, but it's kind of abstract. The Wheel of Fortune is a symbol of change, and it's also a symbol of evolution. Its circular shape symbolizes the marriage of opposites, the totality of things. Though we tend to think of evolution as a continuously upward trajectory, shout out to the March of Progress diagram, which depicts the ascent of humans from primate to man. The Wheel of Fortune reminds us that to evolve could be more accurately described as a process of both contraction and expansion. A caterpillar's metamorphosis, for instance, requires a cocoon before a butterfly. Yes, this is an overused metaphor for change, but it bears repeating because a cocoon is not a thing that sometimes happens before a butterfly. It is a thing that always, absolutely, and irrevocably happens, a prerequisite. I think that it's easier to trust a process when you understand how it works. This way, instead of panicking and being like, oh fuck, what's happening? You might be able to say something more like, wow, this is awful and part of the process and temporary, and really mean it.
Wow. I love that. Makes me want
I,
to read this piece from Terror of the Holy Light by Christine Payne Towler. Um, so she was talking at some point in her description of the wheel. She started talking about being someone who's well versed in the esoteric arts. Let me try to find a passage here. Mm, 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 mm. Was there something you were going to say, Erin?
there was, but I was like, I'm trying to be considerate.
I think we need to break the ice here.
Okay. While you
We're
look for
talking
the,
about the Wheel of Fortune anyway.
all right, I know. I'm used to being on podcasts with one other person, and with
That's right.
three, I'm like, I'm just okay. It's just like another ball in there that the Libra is juggling, right? So,
100%.
I was going to say, Mallory, I love what you shared, what Jessica Dorr wrote, because I find such a relationship between the World card and the Wheel of Fortune, mainly
Yeah.
in their planetary syncretization of Jupiter and Saturn, and how we're always in this dance of contraction and expansion, just obviously as those two work. But then also how there are Jupiterian qualities to Saturn's work, and there are Saturnian qualities to Jupiter's work, and how they really do feel like two sides of a similar coin, even though they are very different and obviously their own thing and have their own mythologies. And so when you were reading that, I was like, yes, the cocoon felt very much like the
Hmm.
Saturnian structure or the Saturnian foundation, from which
Hmm.
something new emerges.
Yeah.
But they also sit next to each other
Hmm.
in the progression of signs, right? Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. So they're like,
Yes.
there's definitely something going on there. Alice
Hmm.
Sparkley Cat writes about that too, in
Yeah.
their piece about the fear of Jupiter and how like we can't really work, we can't practice Jupiter.
Yeah.
Jupiter happens to us, but we can practice Saturn. And then like,
Mm.
how do you marry those? I really like that framing.
Yeah. And I feel like just to to celebrate Saturn a little bit more here. I do feel like Saturn does reward the work. It will make you work, but it does reward. And the way that it rewards, it's not going to withhold if you are due. It will give you your due. If you satisfy the requirements, it will give to you. Where Jupiter, it's a little more loosey goosey. You don't know exactly what you're going to get. You're not going to get gold falling out of the sky from Jupiter, perhaps, but you might get it from Saturn,
Mm.
which is really fascinating. Like Jupiter is much more of this of a spiritual nature, and I think with the Wheel of Fortune, we see both.
Can I say something about
Yeah.
that? That's just making me think about another like way to like access this is like visually, right? When you look at the lines with the wheel, where the wheel is like holding the center between the grounded and the like cosmic, right? Like material and cosmic planes. Like you have Wheel of Fortune numerically uh, is connected to one, the magician. There's this like earthly person who's, got all the tools in front of them. And then the sun, like this planetary entity. And then if you look at the lines vertically, right? You have Wheel of Fortune beneath the Empress, very earthly, like of this world, and the star. So it's
Mm.
these two. I just find that very interesting. It visually and symbolically and just relationally within a deck really demonstrates. You can see clearly that exactly what you're saying, that relationship between like the working with the practical and then also
Mm.
maybe courting and engaging the cosmic.
hmm It's like, what do you do before enlightenment? Chop wood, carry
Carry
water. What
water.
what do you do after enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water. It's like, yeah, I love that. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I found a passage here that I was going to read earlier. This card challenges us to start cooperating with the energies that comprise our substrate, including the autonomic processes that are built into our bodies and our psyches. This means getting to know our birth charts and the movements of the planets and lights overhead. Without this essential knowledge, we will continue to be caught by surprise and cast down by the wheel of fortune, subject to excess ups and downs that waste our energy and break up the continuity of our spiritual cultivation. The wheel is a tester, challenging us to see ourselves in context and surrender to those forces that are larger than ourselves. We must learn to trust that all immediate manifestations are temporary and natural. They are each flowing one after the other according to the larger cycles of nature. The wheel suggests that we integrate ourselves with the flow and go with it instead of fighting it. We don't have to experience ourselves as being mowed down and run over by the process of time. Instead, we can learn to roll with the wheel, learn to work with the tenor of the seasons and the planets in the sky.
Mm. Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree with that. And I'll just say when I was younger, before I had the language of astrology or the knowledge of it really, when good things would happen, I'm like, oh, I finally figured out my life. This is how it is from now on.
Yes,
And then
relatable.
no, it's not. It is a season. So I really like that. It highlighted the temporary quality of life, both in upswing or in a quote unquote good period and a quote unquote bad period.
Mm. Hmm.
I want to add one thing, which is I think everyone needs to read Amanda Yates Garcia's piece on the Wheel of Fortune. 2026 is our year to break the Wheel of Fortune. Because I found as I was listening to that, yes, I do agree. So much of like my own like spiritual development, I guess, or even just learning how to cope with life has been about welcoming seasons, welcoming endings and beginnings and literal death and literal births and it's and at the same time that my rebellious spirit was rising up and I thought of her piece because there is something about I am looking at it now and I'm trying to um find the quote, the passage that stood out. Oh, I think I wrote it in my journal. The Wheel of Fortune is one of the most quietly political cards in the tarot because it attempts to reveal why upheavals happen, explain inequality and loss, and attributes or often obscures who's responsible for catastrophe. And that piece kind of gets into like this idea that there's a certain I think what I said when I got on this call, I was like, oh, I've kind of been brainwashed. We've been brainwashed by the Wheel of Fortune, which is what Amanda's writing about, in that this idea also that, well, we can't, this is fate. This is the powers that be. That can also lead to a certain that can lead to inaction. That can lead to, you know, for some people, I think apathy, even for some, like, well, there's nothing I can do anyway. And it's kind of like in that piece, what she gets to, she suggests that what if the wheel, rather than the image of a wheel that's always spinning that we can't get off of, what about a web, right? And really
Mm.
focusing on, um, and I also really like the idea with the wheel that yes, like so things are life is progressing. There's a lot that we cannot, control, a lot out of our control. But what is our kind of center? I think the wheel is also has a lot to do with locus of control, right? And being
Mm.
really aware, just like you were saying, Jonathan, like what can I control and what can't I? But I just felt like I do feel 2026. We know that 2026 is a really like there's a we're at like a tipping point, a turning point, which is also something that the Wheel of Fortune describes and
Mm.
illuminates. And I think
Yeah.
it is really important to identify, like, oh, well, that I don't want to do that anymore. Or yes, this is happening, and I maybe cannot impact the course of this event, but here's something that I can impact, and here's like a new process that I can initiate in collaboration with others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that too. And it's funny, it's interesting to hear people's experiences with the Wheel of Fortune because I think naturally it's one thing to look at fate, the question of fate and free will, and just be like, oh, I can't do anything. I'm not going to do anything at all. Where I also feel like on working with that or holding that question in the mind is one that is also freeing for, especially for folks who are sensitive, who feel the weight of what's
Mhm.
happening and feel powerless to do something, knowing that, yeah, actually what I am able to change within my own life and within my sphere of influence is what I'm supposed to be working on, you know? It's like
Yeah.
very freeing in a way. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I like that. That wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but I'm like down with it. I'm like, yes, I agree with that as well.
Mhm. Yeah. This is making me think of something that my Chinese astrology teacher said last year about the year of the snake. And I remember when she shared this in a class, it really struck me because her advice was if something is dying or died in your life, let it go. Don't try to resuscitate it for the year of the snake. And as we're currently talking, we're still ending the year of the snake. And I think that's such an interesting thought and somewhat to me related in sentiment to what you were reading earlier from Amanda's piece, Mallory, because I think that a byproduct of capitalism and empire mentality and also modernity is this idea that we are in on a trajectory of constant progress.
Hmm.
I'm currently writing a piece about becoming or encouraging your own failures. And this is something that I'm looking at your face, Erin. But this is something that has been really hard for me. And I I remember learning about my human design, learning that I have a third line on the conscious side, which, in that system, the encouragement is to experiment, to be in this trial and error process. And I've been experimenting with human design for about 5 years now, and I have found that that is very difficult for me because I have been conditioned and I've been raised to be afraid of making what I call a failure. But in the past year, this advice from my Chinese astrology teacher has been really loud in my ears. And I've noticed that there's actually an art to allowing failures to happen in our lives, right? The things that are no longer life-giving, but is somehow still hanging on to us, or the timeline that we're somehow still holding on to, there's there's actually something we can do to make it die, you know? And I'm also obviously subliminally talking about the collective right now too, right? There are things that we are ready to let die,
Hmm.
and our attachments to continuing the vicious cycle is what is preventing it from actually dying.
Mm, yeah.
And what does it look like? Because here's the thing, right? I remember one of my energy work teachers said, there's no such thing as a mistake. Everything is just learning. So then our fear of making a mistake or our fear of failure is actually just the fear of learning, right?
Hmm.
And how do we recognize it as such and actually participate actively in the act of letting go?
I love this so much. There is this woman who gave a TED talk a long time ago. It's almost 10 years now ago, and her name is Simone, and she had a TED talk about why I make useless robots, championing the value of creating flawed and humorous machines. And her whole thing was she's a woman in STEM wanting to learn robotics and was discouraged from doing it. And she had a lot of like we do pent up emotion around the idea of failing at it. And so she set out actually to make machines that failed miserably. And so
Hmm.
it kind of like took the pressure off. And I just love that kind of like twist or flip. Now, when we're talking about what's happening with the world and we need to let things die, that's a little bit, it's not, it's apples and oranges for sure. But I just love that approach about, yeah, calling time on something that's not working anymore and just letting it go and being okay with that. What you were sharing,
Hmm.
Jonathan, reminds me of the passage I was going to read, so I thought maybe I would do that now.
Please.
And so this is from Tarot and the Archetypal Journey, The Jungian Path from Darkness to Light by Sally Nichols. And it's the section on the Wheel of Fortune. And it says, unlike the two beasts on the Wheel of Fortune, we humans have the gift of consciousness and creative imagination. Although our lives are also bound to the wheel of circumstance over which we have no control, we are not pinioned to one spot on its surface. Within the borders of our wheel, there are more opportunities for free movement than we might imagine. Imagine is the key word. As long as we let our imaginations have free play, we can find ways to move about. But when we approach the Sphinx with our ego intellect, we can remain stuck in circular thinking or interminable rounds of philosophizing and psychologizing. One way to keep the imagination free, I have discovered, is to avoid asking the Sphinx questions that begin with why. Why
Hmm.
did this happen to me? Why did I behave like that? Why am I so stupid or misunderstood or whatever? I find that for me, at least, why questions result only in recriminations or accusations, burying my creative energies under tons of shoulds and oughts, which have left me paralyzed with guilt or self-righteousness. Whereas I perhaps took a little too responsibility for my fate. I now begin to imagine what the weight of the whole world rests on my shoulders. Either I am the guilty party, wholly responsible for whatever has happened, or a creature unfit to mingle with humankind, or they are the guilty ones, and it is my job to chastise them, settling their feet once more on the path of righteousness. Either way, one's creativity is paralyzed. Why questions like harpies suck the blood of life? Learning to address the Sphinx in a way that evokes her help is an art. If the questions we ask her are too psychological and philosophical, she will pose counter questions that set one turning verbal somersaults like a trained seal. If our approach is too literal and specific, her answers may send us forth into reality in ways that are inappropriate, if not disastrous. According to the Zohar, in every house of the horoscope, there is a door through which man can escape. And as we have found through the other tarot trumps, the key to this door is symbolic understanding rather than literal interpretation, inner meaning rather than outer movement. Perhaps we cannot escape our fate by running away from it, but perhaps we can modify it by becoming aware of attitudes that might attract such a fate and by changing our viewpoint. And so I just love this idea about getting stuck on the wheel, like this idea of like asking why and trying to figure things out. And Jonathan, when you were speaking about needing to let things die, my biggest thing when I have not been able to let something die is why?
Yeah.
Why did that
Yeah.
happen that way?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's also just like you're naming to the grief inherent in this card.
Yes.
Like the process of grieving, and like that spiral that can happen in our system.
Mhm.
That was a powerful passage. I need that book.
Yeah, the word that my word of the year apparently that I've been reluctantly to accept is acceptance. And it's not
Mm.
acceptance of late stage capitalism, or it's not acceptance of the continued oppression of marginalized peoples. It's the acceptance of things as they are, as they're happening, so that we can do something about it and move in ways
Mm.
that aren't in denial, rather than folks, which I'm not speaking for everyone, but people who might not realize that, yeah, we're at this really big precipice and we can get involved and make a change, or we can pretend that it's not happening.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What I'm hearing is acceptance as seeing reality for what it is, as opposed to being in denial or running away from what we're seeing with some story in our head about how things need to be.
Yeah. Or to
Mhm.
go back to what Mallory shared about Amanda's point, this idea that we are powerless and we can't do anything about it.
Mhm. Or just that, yeah, that I feel like I didn't do I didn't also verbalize a really important point that she makes in that piece. But just about yeah, it's about the power struggles, right? And there's the image of the wheel um it's depicting a power struggle, even the way that, just I did go back and read 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack before this talk, which was really interesting because I haven't visited that in a while. But there's, been a long-standing discussion about just the imagery and this idea of powers rising and falling. And Yeah, it feels really for me, that's like in my body, really. I think for everyone, right? This is really in our bodies right now. Um, this is kind of tangential, but I wanted to ask you both if there are any plants that you work that basically like plants that help you find that inner center, right? Because I was thinking about that a lot too. The thought that came to my mind was like adaptogens, right? Like just riding the building our bodies resilience in moments of stress, but over a long term. Um, so I was thinking of Shazandra, which is Omija in Korea where I live, and also burdock root. Those were two
Mhm.
plants that just kind of came to mind as plants I know well that like, oh, I really need these for that centering as the wheel is spinning. I was just
Mhm.
curious what you two
Yeah.
would have
For
to
for
say about
me, it's oak.
Mm,
And I have a oak tree where I live, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to live right here where I live now is because of the oak tree that is out back. And I love just the whole symbolism every year of it dropping its acorns and it's squirrel heaven. We're like overrun with squirrels that time of year. But it's just so amazing to think about the whole idea about this massive tree that's out there that's so strong and provides this beautiful canopy and habitat for so many. And yet it came from this like little tiny acorn.
Mm. Wow.
And like I like and so to think about it in terms of what we're doing with our own life, it might seem not significant to create a experience for friends by having them over for a potluck. That might seem like in the grand scheme of things, like how is that solving anything or doing anything? But just the fact that we're all gathering together and creating a web, perhaps that web of support
mhm,
versus the wheel, is one small act that might reinforce something more beautiful over time and grow into something more sustainable,
Mm.
mhm,
you
Hmm.
know, those small things, those small little acorns.
Yeah. I'm reminded when you mentioned the web, Erin, of a conversation I had with my partner the other day, which was the difference between a web and a pyramid is that a web implies that all parts are irreplaceable, right? When you take one component of the web out, the whole entire web falls apart. Whereas when you think about the pyramid, right, there's this um, idea of who's at the top. And
mm,
as we get further and further up, there's less space, right? And I think a lot about what it means to create ecosystems that are webs rather than pyramids. Because so much of what we see as, let's just say, unsavory, extractive forces or impact systems in the world happen because we put someone or something at the top, right? We prioritize the top over the whole. And yeah, it's really beautiful what you shared about the acorn. It's interesting, Mallory, your question brought up very mercurial plants for me. The first one
mhm,
I'm thinking about is lavender, actually, because lavender and some other, very mercurial plants tend to help me remember to breathe. I have this pillow
mm,
that's basically filled with lavender, like dried lavender. And every time I feel my nervous system kind of maxing out, it's so helpful for me to hug that pillow and to feel like the wafting aroma of lavender and to
mm,
remember to breathe. And There's something I think also about the Wheel of Fortune where, when we get caught up in that why that you were talking about earlier from the book, from the passage you were reading, Erin, it's making me think about how questions like that, right, get us stuck in a certain thinking pattern, right? And while there's nothing wrong with thoughts, thinking can become its own kind of disease, right? And one antidote that I found through my lived experience is breathing. There's something about breathing that helps me break up the thinking patterns that are obsessive. Hmm.
Can I speak to that?
Yes.
There is so I don't remember who said this, but there was a tarot reader who was talking about how if you look at the major arcana, that the cards are breathing, that they're inhale, there's moments of inhale and moments of exhale. And like the wheel is kind of I think that they were posing that the wheel certainly it feels like an exhale to me, just this like um but at the same time, maybe not, right? It's like it depends on how you look at it because when we inhale, we expand our you know space within. So um I love that you're bringing up breath and um oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought because I was just feeling into the like inhale. Oh, this was my thought was I just you know one of the things that I tell my clients that I talk about with clients in my therapy sessions is about how throughout the day we don't really exhale a lot. We tend to breathe in a lot, but we don't take, and so even just intentionally expanding our exhale, which is like we're letting go, right? It's getting back to what we were talking about, just like letting things go and how even just, taking a few breaths and really like intentionally elongating that out breath can, at least I have found even personally, is so nourishing and helpful for navigating my daily life and just like the change and the chaos and all these impacts of this very wheel energy all around us.
Yeah, I love this conversation because it's making me think about breath and air and swords and the mind and how breath work like literally interrupts your brain pattern or your mind pattern or that pattern of thinking.
Hmm.
And it's like in the Rider Waite anyway, the Sphinx is holding a sword and it's kind of like off to one side. It's not like straight up and down, like the sword of truth. And so it makes me think of like, it's maybe posing the question of like, are you even asking the right question? Are you even thinking about the right thing? Perhaps doing a little breath work. That's fantastic. I love that connection.
Hmm. I feel like we've been alluding to this, but as we're wrapping up, I'm curious if either of you have stories or suggestions, advice about how folks can navigate the Wheel of Fortune year.
I have one that even before, I mean, I can't remember where I found this. It's a Taoist folktale, is what I'm told. But I love this story and it's pretty short, so I'll share it. And this to me sums up just the Wheel of Fortune. It's called Maybe, Maybe Not. There once was a poor farmer who could afford to own just one horse. He cared well for the animal, but one summer night the horse escaped through a weak spot in the fence and ran away. When his neighbors discovered what had happened, they visited to offer their condolences. "What bad luck!" they exclaimed. And the farmer replied, "Maybe, maybe not." A week later, the fugitive horse came back to the homestead accompanied by 6 wild horses. The farmer and his son managed to corral them all, and again the neighbors descended. "What great luck!" they exclaimed. "Maybe," the farmer replied. maybe not. Soon the farmer's son began to work taming all of the new horses. While attempting to ride one, he was thrown to the ground and half trampled, and his leg was badly broken. The neighbors came to investigate. "What terrible luck!" they exclaimed. The farmer replied, "Maybe, maybe not." The next day, soldiers visited the farmer's village. Strife had recently broken out between the two warlords, and one of them had come to conscript all of the young men. Though every other son was commandeered, the farmer's boy was exempted because of his injury. The neighbors gathered once more. "What fantastic luck!" they exclaimed. "Maybe," said the farmer. "Maybe not."
I
So I
love that.
always love that one. Yeah, because it's like that is Wheel of Fortune right there. To
Mhm.
me, one of the
Yeah.
depictions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything you
Um,
want to add, Mallory?
I love that. I'm just taking that story in.
Mhm.
Um, hmm, I think I really think Jonathan. Well, I mean, actually, both of it. Like, I'm gonna go back and definitely listen to this conversation as my own resource for navigating the Wheel of Fortune year. But yeah, maybe I'll just so the the list that I made again. This was sort of how I oriented into the card was just this list of like what is the wheel about? What is the and just different ideas about um what this year might bring. And that list so far is power struggles, expansion, liberation, escalation and change, agency and fear, endings and beginnings, fortune, unpredictability, fertility, instability, interconnectedness, vision, imagination, death and rebirth, freedom and movement, possibility, aka anything could happen, the future, the big picture, locus of control, a tipping point, ecosystems, chaos, ephemerality, and adaptation. I think that finding, finding our center, that would be my guidance. For it's my guidance for myself and for others. But I also think I'm really leaning into breathing, right? Like breathing is really um, intentionally breathing, um, focusing on our spheres, our local small spheres of connection and beauty and creativity and play, as Erin named. Um, and uh, yeah, really, I think leaning full into the imagination. I think that for me, that's Jupiter is where I go to imagine and to believe in the audacious possibility of what I imagine and what we imagine to be possible and to be yeah, true
Mm.
even now at this time. So, um yeah.
Yeah.
Change is really scary, change and in general, right? And our systems are, I would say probably if there's fear or resistance or overwhelm, yeah, finding ways to come back to the body and this inner landscape of peace and groundedness is really important.
Yeah.
How about you, Jonathan?
Well, you're making me think about how much um I've been finding, Mallory, that especially in personal relationships, so much of what is reflected back to me through people who are in intimate relationships with me are a function of what I put into the relationship.
Mm.
I would say even up until a couple weeks ago, there's a tinge of shame around it of like, oh, this is why we ended up fighting because I brought something into the space with a certain energy. But in this moment, especially hearing what you were saying about imagination is making me think about how when something feels possible within us, within our consciousness, we actually have the option to immediately embody it.
Yeah.
If you feel like you are not feeling enough tenderness, enough sweetness in your life, then be the person who is tender and sweet. And by extension, what I found is when I embody these qualities, maybe gratitude or magnanimity or generosity, there's no other option but for reality to mirror that back to me, right? And there's something also about human beings that is so fascinating. We are so malleable, aren't we?
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
are we are these vessels of energies, and I've found that it's not in a manipulating way, but in a way that where we recognize and honor that we are the agents of change in our realities, right? If you want to see a world that looks a certain way, then be that. Be that, even if externally that's not currently mirrored back to you, that's just a time delayed reflection, right? What you are receiving from your reality is, in a way, a reflection of who you were before. But if you just continue being in a certain frequency and you continue giving out a certain energy into the world, there is kind of an inevitability for that to start showing up for you. So I think that maybe my primary advice is for people to remember their power and their responsibility in a way. Because yeah, it's really I think it's well placed. I think it's true that, we need to um call in, call out the flaws in the systems that we've created. And also probably the most powerful thing we can do about it is to investigate our own attachments to it. Because
Mhm.
our energies and our actions are what continues to empower the system, right?
Hmm. Like
Agree.
dissolution, like what? Yeah.
Ooh,
Hmm.
that's a very Neptune word we've
Yes.
inserted into the conversation. Neptune has entered the chat.
Knock, knock. Hello.
I love it.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm. This has been so lovely, and I'm just so grateful for you both. Any final words from either of you?
I would just say, as someone who lives with this energy a lot in their life, there are times I shake my fist at the sky or at the earth, and I pout and have tantrums, and that's normal. I will say the Tao Te Ching is a great resource for wisdom about non-attachment, which probably people already know that. But I'm just saying, as someone, I have found great comfort in parts of that. I'm not thinking of any verse in specifically at the moment, but the whole nature of change that that's life. It's just about being coming into acceptance, again, that word again, with it. And I would say that would be if people find that they might be struggling, that might be something if you're not already familiar with it to check it out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And go to whatever your oak tree is.
Yes. I love a oak tree. I was like, is it possible you can have a tree as a best friend? I mean,
Well, I talk about my romance with the ginkgo trees in my
okay,
neighborhood all the time. So we have a whole we go way back and we are in love with each other. So
that's a wonderful. Okay, good. I'm not alone then.
I feel
Like my
that way
best.
about bodies of ri or bodies of water, rivers and lakes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yep. And I think going to the, you know, going to the non-human kin in our ecosystem is also a really supportive thing to do this year and always, getting kind of out of that human mentality and,
mm,
you know, that helps
Yes.
us attune to cyclical understanding and cyclical, you know, embodiment. And there's so much love there. It's just like, yeah, that tree loves you. You can love that tree. That's, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder because I think that, especially if you're someone experiencing feelings of loneliness right now or not belonging as things shift and change around you. Yeah, more than human world. That's where I felt at home first before I started to find people in my everyday life. Before I found humans, I found the oak
Mhm.
tree. So thank you, Mallory, for reminding us all. That's so important.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing about it.
what are the different ways that people can work with you, Erin and Mallory?
Well, I offer astrological consultation, private mentorship, and then I also am the steward of a few charmed offerings, one of which is still open for enrollment. It's called Devotional Astrology and Tarot, a heart-centered experience of the stars and cards grounded in everyday life. And then I joining my mailing list on Substack, which is the nature of invisible things, and also the name of my podcast is another great way just to follow along and see what I'm up to if you'd like to join in. Oh, and then my website is Slow Magic, magic with a K, slowmagic.com.
What about you, Mallory?
Everything is under my name, Mallory Dowd, so you can find me on Instagram. I have a website and a Substack as well. I offer intuitive tarot readings, both live on Zoom as well as recorded divinations, and I also offer mentorship and support for people who are awakening to magic and curious about a magical practice and tarot, especially. Tarot is my love. I love helping people create their own tarot practice, and yeah, and I share my art and poetry and photography online as well. So yeah, check me out. Connect with me if my voice resonates.
Well, thank you both. This has been so amazing, and I'm sure I will return to this many, many times throughout the year. So, so much gratitude for both your wisdom and knowledge and brilliance.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you both. Thank you.